Welcome back to the channel. Thank y'all for hanging with me on this Tuesday. So iCast just got over. I don't think we got that magic new bait we may have been paying attention for, but however, we did get some new versions of baits that we already had. So there are some companies that came out with a new version of the Whopper Plopper, the Fuzzy Dice, I'm sure a lot of others, but those are the ones that kind of jumped out at me. But why that's important is because you can't really get a patent on fishing lures. You know, there's a patent for what the bait does, there's a patent for what the bait looks like, but really you can't patent something that's already in nature. A lot of baits look like crawfish or some type of fish. So therefore, if you did get a patent, you know, there's little things like the chatterbait where the patent was that you couldn't connect the blade right to the head of the lure. You couldn't use the tombstone type blade on your chatterbait. So those little things you can protect it, but you know, you send out a cease and desist, they don't want to, you're going to go to court and you're going to spend a lot of money. And you look at how much a patent costs, how much money you're actually making on your bait. So unless it is something like the chatterbait where they probably own 90% of the market, it's just not worth it to fight. So you'll see every company come out with the same bait and they're all going to make different sounds. And as fishermen, it's important to know that every company has a good bait. And you have to realize that just because it may be a company that doesn't make anything else good, they may have one lure that works really good. So for that reason, you got to pay attention. And I always like to have the same bait, but a couple different sounds. And I'm going to explain how I do that with the lipless crankbait, because that's probably the easiest. And subsurface lures are probably the most important when it comes to different sounds. But like in the case of the Whopper Plopper, if you're fishing with somebody and they're throwing the one sound, it makes sense to try another sound. Maybe they're just smoking them 10-1 to you, then you go to the one that they're throwing. But if it's like fairly even, or you can gain a little bit of an edge, sometimes a different sound can be a big difference when you're in the back of the boat and you're not getting as many opportunities. So let's talk about how I set my lipless crankbaits up, because I never go fishing with one sound. I have to have multiple sounds. Now, typically lipless crankbaits come in two different sounds. One big tungsten BB makes a knocking sound, or a bunch of little BBs. For this video, I'm just going to do a bunch with little BBs, but if you listen, here's a gold rattle trap. Here's a gold Yozuri. And then here is a gold Rapala. So they're all a little bit different. Now here's a red-eye shad. And here's another rattle trap. But this one I think has maybe one or two tungsten BBs in there. Okay, so what I do is if I'm on a lipless crankbait bite, I'm going to go through my box the night before and I'm going to make a little bit of a day box specific to what I've been catching fish on. So for this reason, because this is a big deal, especially with subsurface lures, is when you start catching fish on a gold lipless crankbait and you've caught 4 or 5, 2 or 3 on it, they stop biting and you know there's more fish there. A lot of times you can try just a different pitch. Doesn't have to be the tungsten one. The tungsten one, the difference is probably going to be the most extreme. So if you really want to go to a very extreme difference, which a lot of times that does work, go to that. But just the same color usually. And I like to have like a couple different colors, you know, depending on conditions changing and all that. It is important to have a couple different colors. So if you're catching them in kind of stained water, a sexy shad, it's going to be a really good cloudy option. Your golds are going to be a really good cloudy option, but have something you can change to quickly. So you don't have to have a bunch of rods rigged up. When you catch a 4-pounder and it's time to retie and you've caught a couple fish and they're not biting anymore, cut it off, switch from the Yozuri to the Bill Lewis. So why I say all this is because every year new baits are coming out. Very important to pay attention. See if they're different enough. You know, a lot of times you're going to buy one of the other ones and you go, there's nothing different about this. There's no possible way a fish could tell the difference, and you're probably right. This, though, however, and this, that's enough to get a fish to bite when they're just sitting there hunkered down. They're not biting for a little bit. That's what can fire up the school. Try that, because I feel like if you try it 1 or 2 times, it's going to work, and you're going to realize that that's a really big deal when you're fishing around groups of fish. You got them kind of fired up a little bit, then they stop, and then you need something to fire them back up. And down here in Florida, we throw a lipless crankbait year round. You know, our grass stays pretty consistent, doesn't really grow too high up, rather, and it doesn't change a whole lot. So we throw the lipless year round, not just in the spring, not just in the fall. We don't really have any seasons here at all. So it's just an offshore grass bait year round. Other places in the country, it gets a lot of attention in the spring, a little bit of attention in the fall, but this is a great bait year round as long as you can get it back to the boat. You know, Gunnersville, places where you're throwing it in the spring, you're not really going to be able to throw it the summer or the fall because the grass grows up too high. But for the example of this video, sound is such a key, so important, and you got to have a tackle box with a few different types of sounds in those baits, especially the subsurface ones. Try that, guys. Good luck to you, and I'll see you on the water.